I'm a local community activist, social justice activist, and I was very much excited when Nathan came to me with the proposal of doing a discussion of civil disobedience. Those of you who know me know that it's a bit of a passion of mine, and I think that this discussion is really well warranted in this movement. I'm going to start off and give a brief summary of some of the things that I've done over the years. Now, most of the civil disobedience that I've participated in has been very ineffective. And it's been very, even possibly negatively affected causes that I've been a part of. I was generally in my late teens, early 20s, and very angry, and channeled that anger into not always the most constructive actions. I participated in the Republican National Convention protests in New York in 2004. We barricaded hotels to prevent delegates from being able to arrive to the convention, and did some time in Pier 57, which was later dubbed the Guantanamo on the Hudson, which is called the beat-up bus terminal, where they housed us with asbestos and nasty oil and other things all over the floor for, pretty much however long they felt like holding us there, because they weren't holding us with charges. I participated in the World Bank IMF protests for about 3 years. That happens every year down in Washington, D.C. Ended up being arrested or otherwise beaten, maced, pepper sprayed, tear gassed, etc. when we would try to force our way into the meetings and disrupt them. Didn't do a whole lot for our cause. We were the black mask, black colored radical anarchists smashing windows and setting things on fire and rolling dumpsters into the streets. And we see how well that's worked out for the anti-globalization movement. Not very well if you watch the press. Brought a lot of negativity in the movement. Now, in our minds, we were doing that because, man, we had to smash capitalism. The only way to do it, man, is to burn shit. Well, it seemed like a good idea in the context of the time, but a lot of us were more angry than contemplative, as Nathan pointed out. Contemplative. And we saw an opportunity to spray paint a police car with a really radical message, and did it, and then asked ourselves, why are the police being so violent to us? Why did they pepper spray me when I tried to push them and knock them over and use shields against them? More recently, I was involved, actually just this past weekend, this kind of came about on the fly. I ended up in New York City for the Occupy Wall Street protests. I was in Times Square on Saturday when the clashes happened there. Wouldn't you guessed it, I was right in the middle of the clashes. I have a tendency of finding myself in those situations. And in that situation, it was a little different. For the first time in my life as an activist, I found myself confronting police in a completely nonviolent context, and in a context which has actually resulted in an increase in awareness about this issue, and has actually built the movement as a whole. The Occupy Wall Street movement was fledgling, a couple hundred people in Zuccotti Park, until 700 people were arrested for nonviolent actions on the Brooklyn Bridge, and it really was a black eye for the police department. It was a black eye for the establishment as a whole, and it led to masses of people coming in support of that movement. And then the videos hit about the girls being pepper sprayed after being netted, simply for being in the streets, not being violent, not smashing windows, not vandalizing anything, but simply being repressed. And then on Saturday, we ended up moving north from Washington Square Park. We followed every rule and every order that the police gave us that night. They told us to stay on the sidewalks. We kept moving on the sidewalks. They told us to stop at the crosswalks. We stopped at the crosswalks. We marched like that for 35 blocks. And then we tried to turn left on 42nd Street, and they put nets around us and told us we couldn't go that way. So we went up to 43rd Street, and then to 44th and to 45th, and they kept on telling us that we couldn't go that way, even though we were essentially pedestrians on a sidewalk as far as the law is concerned. And not to mention there were already 10,000 people in Times Square waiting for us. So our group of about 5,000 finally were allowed to turn left onto 46th Street, only to find ourselves getting to the end of 46th Street to a barricade that had been set up to prevent us from entering into the square where 10,000 other people were waiting for us. So what did we do? We marched up against the barricade. Did we throw punches? Did we throw stones? No. Did we throw insults? No. We actually asked the police to join us. We told them that we were concerned about their pensions and benefits, and that it seemed like to us that we had heard about something about the New York City Police Department getting $4.5 million from J.P. Morgan Chase, but that none of that had gone into their pension fund, which had been slashed and burned the year before as a result of the Wall Street catastrophes. I'd never been up against police before and seen contemplation in their eyes, and possibly even just a tinge of regret. After a while, as 5,000 people tried to stream into that park, or into that square, it got a little tight. It was a little painful to be up against that gate with 4,000 other, 5,000 other people behind you pushing. We cried out to them, let us into the center of the square. We'll walk across the crosswalk. To no avail, so we linked arms and we started pushing our way. After an hour-long standoff, and after outcry from the media that was there in force, and actually we had Amy Goodman was part of our little march that day. And after about an hour-long standoff, we made the world news when the police allowed us to walk across the street peacefully and without incident. All the arrests that took place that day took place in other places, and we kept it peaceful. Small victory, part of a longer movement. And I think that the people that we're going to introduce here can give you a better idea of some more planned and coordinated direct action. First person I'm going to introduce is Barbara Van Horn. Barbara, tell us what you got.
I've only been arrested twice, but I'm not done yet.
Woohoo!
And I've done a number of things that I haven't gotten arrested. I've been a rebel, I guess, most of my life. I bit the dentist when I was 6 years old, and he refused to ever see me again. But I went through my early adult years pretty calm and conformist. Got married and raised a couple kids. So I missed the 60s, and I'm pretty sure I've been trying to make up for it ever since.
Sounds good.
I had my first grandchild born 25 years ago. And I started really getting serious about protesting. And the rest of my family was pretty unhappy with me because they were far more conservative. And I was with Dan and Phil Berrigan and talking to them about the problem that I had with my family, trying to talk to them. And they said, we have a brother who disapproves of everything that we do. And their best advice to me was let your life be your conversation. Sometimes you don't need to talk. Sometimes you just need to act. And the first time I was arrested was 20 years ago. And the t-shirt that I have on is 20 years old and comes from that event. It was at the nuclear test site, Mercury, Nevada, near Las Vegas. And it was a planned arrest, just as my last arrest was a planned arrest. Large group of people, Martin Sheen, Jim Wallace, the Berrigans, a lot of other people. We consciously decided that we would cross over the line at the test site. And I had gone with a couple of friends, and they were planning to go with me. But at the last minute, there was actually a test set off so that the area was unsafe for people who were still of childbearing age, people who had immunosuppressive problems. And so neither of the people that I was able to go with were able to go with me. So I sort of went with an orphan. I was adopted by a group of Catholic workers from San Francisco who were my support group. And we had arranged in advance with the security forces. And as this group has been doing for many, many, many years, it's called the Nevada Desert Experience. Maybe some of you have even participated in that. And they knew that we were coming. Wackenhut was the security people. They knew that we were coming. They knew that we were deliberately crossing the line. They also knew that with us were the Native American people who actually owned that land. It wasn't even owned by the government. And so each one of us had for our identification to give the police officers a permit to be there, which they didn't even have. We had a permit to be there from the people who really owned the land. And we were, over the years, we had developed a pretty friendly relationship with the Whack and Hunt guards. So there's a cattle guard that's kind of rough on the knees, and the guards would put down blankets so we could kneel on the cattle guard, which is part of the team. And they put down these blankets to help protect our knees. But they still arrested us anyway, so we walked across the line. We were held briefly and handcuffed, and a number of years before, they had taken all the prisoners to the county seat and processed them. But they had given up that because it got too much attention. So they wanted to keep it as quiet as possible. They still, even today, arrest people, but they don't take them and prosecute them. They fine them briefly. I've done a number of actions where I have chosen not to be arrested. I've protested in about every war that's come down the pike in the last couple decades. And sometimes I've been with people who have chosen to go ahead and get arrested. So you always have the choice. And I had a choice this summer. First of all, I didn't get arrested at the governor's mansion when I celebrated my 80th birthday.
That was a nice party.
Yeah, with a anti-fracking party, right?
Yay!
Of course, a lot of relatives said, "Oh, you'll probably get arrested," but I didn't. But I did choose to get arrested at the tar sands protests that went on this summer. I went with Rachel and Susan, my friends, and we deliberately chose to stand in front of the White House at an area that is supposed to be a photo op. So you're not allowed to stand still. And there's an area where the police had told us we couldn't stand. They told us that they would warn us 3 times, and if we still stayed there without leaving, we would be arrested. So with their bullhorns, they made the 3 announcements, and we chose to stay. And at that point, they brought up like an orange, well, same kind that we had in New York, those orange nets. And at that point, we couldn't leave if we wanted to. And then they arrested us randomly, one at a time, handcuffed us, processed us, took our pictures, and put us in paddy wagons and took us to the police station. We were very dangerous because, of course, they had a motorcycle escort in front and back of the paddy wagon. And we were processed, given the option to do what they call post and forfeit, which would pay a fine. And we all knew ahead of time that was going to be one of our options. So we posted and forfeited, and then were released, and we were well supported. The hardest part of it for me was sleeping overnight in the church the night before. But no, we didn't. We had cushions from the pews. It was still very uncomfortable. And when you have 2 knee replacements, it's very hard getting all the way down on the floor. And we're going again. We're going down to circle the White House, also in protest of tar sands. But I am ready to get arrested if necessary for go back. I have a beautiful little cabin in Sullivan County that's been in our family for over 40 years. And they're cracking all around us. 1 mile from my cabin is a facility where they're mixing chemicals. You saw it, the roadhouse, Sullivan County Roadhouse. And believe me, it's worth doing this.
My story has to do with the fact that when I graduated from high school, I went to Kent State University in Ohio. And at Kent State, I got to know some of the people who were shot in 1970. Now, there were 4 people who were killed, but there were 9 people who were wounded that day. And one of them was a friend of mine by the name of Dean Kaler. And Dean was paralyzed from the waist down as a result of being shot in 1970. Kent State University decided to build a gymnasium on part of the site of the 1970 shootings. This was a number of years later. They started making plans for it about 6 years after the shootings. Many of us who had been working to get some sort of justice for what had happened in 1970 were absolutely outraged. And in May 4th, 1977, the 10th anniversary of, the 7th anniversary of the shootings, we did the classic thing. I helped to lead the takeover of the administration building at Kent State. Now, this was the start of a campaign that lasted nearly a year, cost Kent State University millions of dollars, and it also involved us building a tent city on the site. We're going to have this tent city, and it kind of reminds me of the Occupy. You're like, we're going to have a tent city, and we're going to live here. We lived there for like about 2.5 months. And then, like, the university was finally fed up with us, and they got an injunction. And so we got ready for civil disobedience. We got training from some Quakers, and 194 of us were arrested. Our means was that we intended to resist arrest nonviolently. We sat on the ground. I had somebody sitting in front of me like this, and I was linked into a couple of other people like this. So the police had to pull us apart. So we were let off one by one. They put us on buses, and there was like a $250 bail, which you could get out by paying $25. This is in 1977, so you got to readjust the money. But we were like continuing. So like the university built a cyclone fence around the site. 63 of us climbed the cyclone fence, and we were arrested as a result of that. They decided to throw the book at us. So, like, then it was the bail was $2,500, no 10%. You like needed to come up with the money, which we did not have. So I and my comrades ended up spending 5 days in jail, waiting for the movement to raise 2,500 times 62. Whatever that was. There was a long movement to oppose that gym that involved dozens and dozens of demonstrations. We had Joan Baez there. We brought in others, celebrities. We had court cases that ended up going to the Supreme Court, and you know, I was raised an awful lot of ruckus, but guess what, folks? They built that damn gym, and I learned something. It took me a while, but I learned something. Is that noise and activism isn't the same as winning. It's I got concerned, and I think I was quite fortunate that I had a friend who was a community organizer in inner city Akron, Ohio, and he said, "Hey Nate, you want to come to Akron and raise some hell that's going to actually benefit some people?" So, I started the process of learning how to be a community organizer. The short of it is, I would, in the right circumstances, be willing to be arrested again, and I'd be willing to go to jail again in the right circumstances. But I'll tell you this, I would rather take 300-400 people to the offices of Chesapeake Energy and peacefully disrupt their business as a way of demonstrating the fact that we have numbers and that we're growing and going places. I've been a community organizer now for over 25 years, and I've won campaigns, the organizations have won campaigns, and I've lost campaigns. But I've come to decide any particular tactic is less important than does it bring the movement more people, because people is power. Does it bring the movement more resources, money, publicity of the right kind? Like, does a particular tactic